The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. Give your sister your penthouse as a wedding gift, my father, George, told me into the microphone. His voice was huge and steady, booming past the chandeliers. 200 guests stopped sipping their drinks. My mother, Susan, kept her smile perfect. My sister, Melissa, blinked slowly, faking shock. I stood there holding my glass, feeling every eye focused on me. The background music had died. Someone whispered Linda's name. Then a man I had never seen before rose from his chair and stated calmly but firmly, "If you attempt to seize her property again, you will forfeit your own." The whole room went silent. My father's jaw tightened instantly. Before I tell you the rest, I should explain my background. I used to believe that silence ensured peace. I thought if I simply smiled at the right times, nodded when expected, and never let my voice sound nervous, my family would finally see me as one of them. But peace resting on silence always breaks fast, especially in our house. My parents were obsessed with appearances. My mother thought perfection could be arranged, just like table centerpieces, neatly organized, polished, and presented for admiration. My father lived for public acclaim. My sister was their great achievement, the one who could never be faulted. I, however, was just a line item they couldn't brag about, but they couldn't afford to lose me either. When anyone asked about my career, my mother would laugh gently and say, "Oh, she works somewhere in finance." I don't think she ever mentioned that I was the vice president of global investment strategy, or that my signature could approve multi-million-dollar transactions. For her, true success was only meaningful if it included a husband. My sister, by contrast, didn't need to earn attention. She was delicate, glowing, the picture of the perfect daughter. She would call me her big sister in front of guests like it was an accessory, a sweet prop to make herself seem humble. I played along for many years. I funded the small things that kept the family looking good. I covered a mortgage when my father's business endeavor failed. I wired cash to mother for unexpected expenses. I even transferred $50,000 to cover some of my sister's wedding costs. They never had to ask twice. They simply accepted it as if it were my duty. The week before the wedding, my father pulled me aside. "You will sit right at the front," he instructed. "You're family naturally. Just remember to keep things simple. It's Melissa's moment." Simple, I repeated later, alone in my car, laughing. He had no understanding of what simplicity meant. When I showed up at the rehearsal dinner, the lighting was soft gold over white roses. Everything was flawless, staged perfectly for photographs. Mother fussed over my sister's veil. Father spent more time shaking hands with investors than with relatives. I stood by the bar, invisible and overlooked once more. Then my sister turned to me, her smile dripping with sweetness. "Linda, thank you again for helping us with the expenses," she announced, making sure nearby tables heard. The word helping felt like an insult. My father nodded his approval. This was the dynamic they enjoyed. Public gratitude that sounded generous but made my contribution small. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I would attend, sit quietly, and fulfill my role. One more evening, one final performance. I did not realize that beneath their shiny smiles, my family had written me into the wedding schedule as the initial act, a sacrifice to complete their perfect day. The wedding morning arrived, bathed in sunlight that made the day look innocent. But underneath the expensive flowers and the champagne chillers, I felt a dangerous tension. My gut always alerted me before my mind did. I reached the hotel ballroom early. The heavy scent of white lees was overwhelming. Staff members were busy hanging decorations and cleaning glasses. My mother's voice was loud and commanding, cutting through the activity. "Make sure the bouquet faces the left side. Her profile looks best that way." It was always in order. I was walking past the guest registration table when I saw him. A man standing completely still, observing. He wore a charcoal suit and a silver thread tie. His posture was controlled and deliberate. He did not look like one of the guests. When his gaze met mine, I froze. He gave a small formal nod, then said quietly, "Be aware of what they announced today." His tone was so flat it bordered on kindness. He turned away and dissolved into the rush, leaving a chill on my skin. For a moment, I questioned if I had hallucinated it, but then my phone buzzed in my hand. A text from an unknown number. "They plan to seize what is yours tonight. Do not lose it." The words punched the air from my lungs. I looked around, but no one seemed to notice. My father was laughing with a group by the bar. My mother was adjusting my sister's dress. Guests began arriving in waves of noise and expensive scent. I quickly stepped into the corridor, heart pounding. My penthouse. It was the single possession that was entirely mine. Every payment, every late night, every stressful contract built it brick by brick. They couldn't possibly mean that, could they? Just then, I heard my parents' voices through the partially open door of a nearby room. I should have kept walking, but I stopped. My father's tone was low and strategic. We will make the announcement during the toast. It will make Melissa's gift unforgettable. My mother chuckled softly, and Linda will not dare decline. Too many witnesses, too many cameras. Pride can be a useful tool. My sister's voice followed, sounding hesitant, but pleased. Are you really sure she'll be okay with it? My mother's reply was sickly sweet, like syrup laced with poison. She has no need for that amount of space. She has her career. You deserve a proper home. The blood drained completely from my face. They weren't just bragging. They were arranging to take the property I built and display it as a gesture of phony sisterly love. I pushed my back against the cold wall, every muscle locked. The light from the chandelier inside danced on their smiling faces. I didn't intervene. Not yet, because this time I wouldn't be the one who reacted. I would be the one who remembered. I went back to my suite without uttering a sound. The hallway carried the heavy fragrance of roses mixed with nervous expense. Inside, the atmosphere felt charged, expectant, like the quiet moment before a sudden storm hits. I placed my phone on the vanity and retrieved a single folder from the drawer. It held the records, statements, payment proofs, and legal ownership documents. Every figure, every signature, and every piece of paper connected that penthouse directly to me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pages. A decade of effort was condensed into those lines of ink. My parents did not build that residence. They didn't have to work across multiple time zones or chase deals that nearly destroyed me. All they understood was how to spend money they hadn't earned. I forwarded the entire set of documents to my lawyer, including a single instruction. Be ready at 8:00 p.m. ballroom. No explanation was necessary. No emotion was conveyed. Next, I changed into a deep navy gown. Clean lines, structured, and completely unyielding. I was done trying to fade into the background. When I faced the mirror, the woman staring back was almost unrecognizable. My expression was composed, but underneath I felt like a drawn weapon waiting for use. I adjusted the diamond earrings I had purchased to celebrate a massive contract that saved an entire division. Tonight, those earrings would serve a different purpose. A physical reminder of who I was before they tried to steal everything. The ballroom downstairs was already crowded. The sound of silverware clinking, the low chatter of conversations, and the soft music playing in the background. It was all so highly refined it turned my stomach. I moved through the guests quietly, my heels barely audible on the polished floor. I caught fragments of the gossip floating by. Melissa's wedding is perfect. Such a refined family. Linda looked stressed. They had no idea what was about to happen. My sister glided past me in her wedding dress, radiant beneath the light fixtures. I am truly so happy you could come, she said sweetly, her hand lightly brushing my arm, acting as if we were equals. I almost smiled. Almost. Moments later, my father clapped his hands to demand attention. Everyone, please settle down for the toast. My stomach tightened instantly. It was almost time. I walked toward a table in the corner, the one offering the clearest line of sight to the stage. The guests quickly quieted down, anticipating whatever huge announcement he had prepared. He adjusted the microphone, scanning the room, radiating overwhelming pride. My mother stood right beside him, beaming with satisfaction. I checked my pulse. It was steady, not panicked. Regardless of what they were about to attempt, I was prepared. I raised my glass, just slightly enough to conceal the faintest trace of a smile. If they were seeking a performance, they were about to get one, just not the version they had rehearsed. The sound of crystal hitting glass echoed through the ballroom. 3 sharp taps that instantly silenced the soft music and chatting. My father, George, stood center stage, his hand on the microphone, his silver cufflinks reflecting the chandelier light. Before we start dinner, he announced, smiling widely, I want to share a few thoughts about what family means. The crowd quieted immediately, forks hung suspended above plates. My sister, Melissa, stood next to him, her long gown train flowing behind her like a white satin river. My mother gently touched my sister's shoulder using that perfected showy affection. I remained seated several tables away, watching them. I already knew what was coming next, but a small part of the human mind always desperately hopes for misunderstanding. My father's voice took on a deeper tone. A family's real strength, he stated, is measured not by what we hold on to, but by what we are willing to share. My grip tightened on my wine glass, the delicate stem pressed painfully into my palm. And tonight, he continued, sweeping his gaze across the guests, we have something truly remarkable to celebrate. He paused dramatically. My eldest daughter, Linda, has decided to give her sister. He stopped again for effect. Her penthouse as a wedding gift. The words hit the room like an explosion. Before I could even react, applause broke out. I heard numerous gasps, some laughter and cheers. Someone yelled, "That is unbelievable generosity." Cameras flashed, recording the moment that was intended to show me as obedient, generous, and harmless. My father announced it into the mic for 200 people to hear, I thought. I was paralyzed. I didn't stand up. I couldn't speak. For 3 agonizing seconds, I couldn't move at all. The air seemed to grow thick, and the smell of champagne turned instantly bad. My sister pressed a manicured hand to her mouth, feigning total shock. My mother's smile was alight with obvious triumph. "Linda," my father said warmly, "come join us up here, sweetheart. Say a few words." 100 faces rotated toward me. I felt the heat of every stare, waiting for me to smile and join the performance. Instead, I took a long, slow sip of my wine. The glass in my hand barely trembled. My father's confident grin started to fade. "Come on, darling," he coaxed, his voice amplified by the microphone. "Don't be shy." The music had completely stopped. My heart, however, was still beating hard. Then a loud sound. A chair scraped roughly against the marble floor. At the far edge of the room, a man rose. It was the same man from the morning, the one wearing the silver thread tie. His voice was low and steady, yet it traveled to every corner of that glittering hall. "If you attempt to seize her property again," he stated, "you will forfeit your own." The entire room froze solid. The silence was so extreme, it felt like a physical pressure. My father's face instantly lost all color. My mother blinked, clearly unsure whether she should be angry or scared. My sister clutched her bouquet, staring at the stranger. He began walking toward the stage, each step sounding like a distinct gavel strike. "I am David Sterling," he announced, pulling a sleek business card from his jacket pocket. "CEO of Sterling Group." The immediate murmurs began, whispers and sharp intakes of breath. People started shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. My father stumbled back slightly, recognition flashing in his eyes. "I believe you are familiar with my company," David continued. "We have worked closely with your daughter for 3 years now. The penthouse you are attempting to claim with this little announcement," he added, raising one eyebrow, "is part of her legal executive compensation package. It is specifically protected by anti-coercion clauses under her contract." I could clearly hear my mother's ragged breath from across the distance. She reached for my father's arm, whispering something frantic. David's voice remained perfectly level. "What occurred here tonight," he declared, "was a public effort at asset seizure, and it is currently being live-streamed to over 10,000 viewers right now." Heads whipped toward a nearby table where a cousin from the groom's side had his phone set up. The red recording light glowed brightly like an accusation. My father tried to force a laugh, thin and brittle. "This is just a simple misunderstanding," he stammered. "Perhaps a family joke taken too far." David's expression hardened. A joke that involved coercion, public embarrassment, and false property transfer claims. He addressed the audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what exploitation looks like when it hides behind the label of family love." The room burst into shocked whispering. A few guests stood up from their tables. Others stared at me with fresh eyes, confusion mingling with profound embarrassment. My father's business partner, Mr. Lewis, rose, his face pale. "George," he said sharply, "I invested in your firm because I trusted your ethical standards. After this display, Lewis Industries is canceling all collaboration effective immediately." Then Miss Thompson from Logistics spoke up. "Same here. We absolutely do not work with abusers. Finally, Robert Chun, my father's longest-standing associate, added quietly, but with finality, "Neither will we." My father's hand gripped the microphone stand, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Melissa was weeping now, soft, confused sobs that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dad, make it stop," she whispered, but the situation had already passed the point of no return. Their carefully constructed house of cards had completely collapsed. I stood up slowly. The high noise level around me faded into a distant low drone. "You wanted a show," I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "Now you have one." My mother turned to face me, her polished expression cracking into pieces. "Linda, please," she hissed. "You are humiliating us." I took a deliberate step closer, my heels tapping sharply on the marble floor. "No, Mother, you brought this humiliation upon yourselves." David handed the microphone directly to her. "Perhaps Mrs. Susan would like to clarify her behavior for the record," he suggested evenly. She shook her head rapidly, visibly trembling. "You can't do this," she whispered desperately. "I already did," I replied. The crowd erupted once more. Some guests gasped audibly, others murmured their approval. I noticed phones raised everywhere, recording and capturing every second of my family's total collapse. My father's voice, rough and cracked, cut through the noise. "Enough. This is strictly a private family issue." I met his eyes heaten. "You made it public." The following silence was colder and more painful than any scream could have been. I didn't need to say anything further. David placed a reassuring hand gently on my shoulder, guiding me toward the main exit. Behind us, my mother's sobs started to rise. My father yelled something incoherent that I chose to ignore. My sister's wedding day instantly morphed into a live, public broadcast of the consequences they faced. As the large ballroom doors swung shut, the last sound I heard was a single wine glass shattering violently on the floor. Outside, the cool night air felt like sudden truth against my skin. I looked up at the vast city skyline, seeing the reflection of my penthouse sparkling far off in the distance. For the first time, its walls didn't feel like a prison, but like a suit of armor protecting me. David Sterling stopped next to me. "Are you doing all right?" he asked quietly. I let out a slow breath. "I am now." He nodded in acknowledgement. "You handled that entire situation better than most people would." I glanced back at the glowing doors of the venue. "No," I responded softly. I just finally stopped making excuses and apologizing. We stood there for a moment, two near strangers connected by a shared moment of justice. Then he extended his business card again. "When you find some time," he stated, "I would like to discuss something much bigger." I didn't ask what he meant. I instinctively knew this was not the end of my story. It was merely the beginning of theirs. Behind us, the hall that had once celebrated my submission was now completely, irreversibly silent. By the next morning, the clip had gone completely viral. A 1-minute video showing my father's announcement, my mother's harsh reaction, David's voice cutting through, and the subsequent chaos circulated across every social media platform before sunrise. Headlines immediately labeled it the wedding scandal that ruined a family. My email inbox flooded with messages from strangers. Many women who had spent years being told to keep the peace at their own expense thanked me for finally taking a stand. Meanwhile, the consequences for my parents were immediate and crushing. Lewis, Thompson, and Chenal retracted their contracts. The company's stock price plummeted by half within 48 hours. My father's apology video, where he appeared in a suit with exhausted eyes, was widely dismissed as poor damage control. My mother tried to claim online that she had been manipulated, only to be overwhelmed by thousands of comments, criticizing her for the slap that everyone had clearly witnessed. My sister's perfect marriage dissolved before it could even begin. Her fiancé's family pulled out, unwilling to link their name to the current wreckage. I remained completely silent through all of it. I didn't need to mount a defense. The truth had already done that work for me. When David Sterling called to offer me a board seat at Sterling Group, I accepted, not out of a desire for revenge, but for clear direction. Because for the first time, I was no longer struggling to survive my family. I was actively rebuilding myself. Weeks later, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse apartment. The city lights flickered below, seeming like quiet, supportive applause. The same glass walls they had tried to steal from me now reflected everything I had truly earned. Clarity, freedom and peace. On a shelf nearby, I kept a framed photograph of my grandmother. Her handwritten note was tucked beneath it. Don't let them extinguish your light. I smiled. They hadn't succeeded. They never would. If you have ever been forced to stand alone at a table full of people who call themselves family, understand this. You are not isolated. Share your experience below, and remember to hit subscribe. The next story we feature might be yours.